in prayer, and then we're going to start. Heavenly Father, just thank you so much for your goodness and your grace and your love, and I'll pray that you give me the words to say as I share some things from Scripture today, asking in Jesus' name, amen. You're going to look at Jeremiah 35 in a minute, reading Hebrews 12:10 at the moment, and here's what it said. Let's talk about parents, and we're talking about parents today and parenting, and it's a constant in a world of variables because no matter what's going on in the world, you got to parent. Got to pay attention to what's going on in your family, right? So it said in Hebrews 12:10, they disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good in order that we may share in his holiness. Parents disciplined us for a little while as they thought best. Didn't mean they always got it right? Didn't mean they always had the right approach to it. I remember my mom, she wasn't like a big, tall woman or anything. And so by the time I was 12, I wasn't really threatened. You know what I'm saying? So she would just say, because she knew she couldn't catch us or run us down or anything like that, if we were misbehaving, she would say, whatever is closest to me is coming at you. So it could be a shoe, could be a knife. Are you willing to take that chance? One time she hit me, she caught me up. I was running away from her and I tripped on the stairs. So she finally caught me, hit me with a dustpan. It doesn't sound too bad, but dustpans were metal back then. You know what I'm saying? So, and I never thought anything too much about that. I just realized, that was kind of me. My dad, he wasn't, nearly as creative as my mom. He just had to pick what belt to use, right? Remember hearing that growing up, anybody? I'm coming in there with a belt. If you guys don't shut up, I'm going to come in there. And then he'd ask the question, do you want me to come in there with a belt? Do you want me to? This has got to be the most rhetorical question in the world. Do you want me to? Yes, please. I can't shut up. I'm obviously out of control. We need some intervention in this bedroom right now. But that's obviously, we didn't feel that way at all. But my dad, I'll say this. Well, both of my parents. They were way better behaved than I was. How about that? Okay, so I look at parents, they didn't have it all right. I know we didn't as kids always have it right either, but they did their best. And the challenge today is to teach your children the right way. And Proverbs 22:6 start off children the way they should go, and even when they're old, they won't depart from it. And it's a big responsibility to train, to start, means to inaugurate, to begin. And so what it's saying is, hey, it's like kind of directing a putt, right? You don't want to chase it down later on. It's better to direct your putt when you first hit the ball, not chase it down the green, across and then trying to direct it from there. Direct it right from the get-go. And that's what it's saying with children. You got to start them off in the right way. If you start them off in the right way, that's the way they're going to tend to go. So, a lot of hope here for parents, and I believe there's wisdom from two areas. One, the Bible, huge. Two, experience. And in my experience, this biblical verse has come true so often, where you'll see kids, they're pointing in the right direction, then they're like, you know what I mean? And then they're going their own way, and then they're circling back around. Because it's hard to walk away and break what you're trained as a kid and what that faith is. And the great lessons that your parents instill into you are extremely impactful. So it's our responsibility to start them off in the right way. And one of the things that we do have as a church here, which I really do appreciate, is Awana on Wednesday nights. And junior church on Sunday mornings. Actually, there will be a meeting if you'd like to help out with VBS after this service today in the junior church room. And it's nice to have so many programs as a church that we can look at and, hey, this is helping too. Honestly, like I learned stuff. I remember my dad, he didn't do it all the time, but there would be times he'd be reading to you from the children's Bible. There are times you'd be Sunday morning church and you're listening to the speaker speak and you learn Bible stories and you learn truth that way. And then it was whoever was teaching you when you're 7 years old, 8 years old, Sunday school and your junior church and things like that. And you would just pick up these lessons. So I would say, my parents were a big part of that. I would say also church was a huge part of me growing up and hearing lessons because they actually believed the Bible. They taught the Bible. And all those things helped me tremendously. So we've got the story in Jeremiah 35. And what happens is there's a family called the Rechabites. So the Rechabites are brought into the temple of the Lord. And they tell them, hey, before these Rechabite people, what I want you to do is I want you to set bowls of wine and cups of wine. And I want you in the temple of the Lord, in one of the rooms, and I want you to encourage them to drink the wine. But they said, no. They said, and the reason we're going to say no to the wine is because our forefather, Jehonadab, commanded us not to drink wine. and not to build houses and not to plant vineyards and not to plant gardens because they lived in tents. They were a nomadic people. So from his perspective and the way that he wanted his family to live was away from the urban temptations. He had seen a lot in his life, and he wanted to protect his family, so he made these guidelines, and his family followed. And we pick it up in Jeremiah 35, starting with verse 5, and God is going to use his family and say, hey, look at these guys. They listen to Jehonadab, but you, Israel, won't listen to me. Aren't I a dad? Like, I'm your spiritual dad. You're not listening to me. Look at this family. They listen. And so here it goes, Jeremiah 35, verse 5. And maybe you've heard me speak on this before. Perhaps not. Perhaps you've never heard of these guys. But then I set bowls full of wine and some cups before the Rechabites and said to them, drink some wine. But they replied, we do not drink wine because our forefather Jehonadab, son of Rechab, gave us this command, neither you nor your descendants must ever drink wine. Also, you must never build houses, sow seed, or plant vineyards. You must never have any of these things, but you must always live in tents. And then you'll live a long time in the land where you are nomads. So listen, you're going to prosper. You're going to do better. I want you to be able to live in a tent. And he said, we have obeyed everything our forefather Jehonadab, son of Rechab, commanded us. Neither we nor our wives nor our sons and daughters have ever drunk wine or built houses to live in or had vineyards, fields, or crops. We have lived in tents and have fully obeyed everything our forefather Jehonadab commanded us. Now, let's let that sink in. None of us, not us as heads of our home, not our wives, not our kids, none of us. All of us have followed what Jehonadab said and the guidelines he has set. Who lived over 200 years prior to this? Jehonadab was with Jehu when Jehu was wiping out Ahab and his descendants. He was in the chariot, actually. Jehu invited him up into the chariot with him. Jehonadab, come up here with me. That's where he was. Now, I would assume that Jehonadab saw a lot. He saw the idol worship. He saw the Baal worship. He saw what a disaster. He saw the downfall of the family of Ahab. And there was something about all that he saw and didn't want for his own family. And he said, this is how we're going to fix this, guys. This is how we're going to live. We're going to be nomads. We're going to live out in tents. And this is why I don't want you doing this stuff. And everyone bought into that. You see it, a clear example to me. I look at this and see how important parenting truly is. I mean, this guy can say, this is who we are, this is the way we are. And I hope we as a family, if you have kids around, or even grandkids, hey, this is the way our family operates. This is who we are, this is the way we are, right? Who we are, the way we are, you have some type of code because you will, I mean for good or bad, you are going to definitely impact your family, parents, like, have no doubt. You will leave, there will be a legacy you pass down, one way or the other. And so I see here, I'm like, okay, well, parents, we have to set direction. You do not, the last thing you want to do, parents, is let society dictate what your kids are doing. And let society tell you the direction your kids should go or what your kids should believe. You, parents, train up a child, right? Set the direction. Set them on the right course. Parents, and when they're old, they will not depart from it. We have this responsibility. It's not Snapchat, not TikTok, not the cell phone, not the schools, not the government, right? You do. You're the captain of the family ship, and if you don't like where it's going, what I would recommend to you to do is this. Put your hand on the helm and direct that ship the way you think it should go. Children are not at the helm of the ship. They are not making the decisions, right? You're making decisions as a parent to say, no, this is the right way to go. These are the boundaries. Train up your child. Now, one thing I learned from him, I don't know how this is going to pan out in your world or what you're even going to think about it. Keep the rules simple versus this. Ton of rules. Don't do. You give a ton of little rules over picayune stuff you don't need to be fighting about, you don't even need to be talking about. All you're going to do is create a situation where they want to rebel. And a lot of times when they rebel, it's not just the picayune things they're rebelling against. They're going to throw the whole thing out. I came from Christian school for a time in my life. I had that mentality, all rules are stupid. Why? Because they were so nickel and dime, little dumb stuff that you started to think all rules are stupid. Now, fortunately for me, I didn't think of God's rules. So when it came to God's rules, I still had enough sense to say, well, I'm not going to throw that out. But sometimes when kids rebel, they don't throw out just your picayune rules. They're throwing out God's rules too, and throwing out all of it. So my recommendation is keep it simple. He said to them, don't drink, don't build homes, don't plant gardens, don't plant vineyards. Boom, live in tents. There you go. Just follow that. When Christianity was spreading to the Gentiles, here was the discernment of the church. In Acts 15, it is my judgment, therefore, that we not make it difficult for the Gentiles returning to God. This is my discernment. Don't make it difficult. Don't give these people a ton of rules. Don't be talking to them about circumcision. Don't be talking about, kosher diets. Don't be talking about these food rules and all this stuff. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep it simple. So he said, write to them, telling them, this is what I want you to tell the Gentiles. Abstain from food polluted to idols. Why? Idolatry is a huge, big issue. So, guys, just stay away from that, from sexual immorality, from meat of strangled animals, and from blood. In other words, they wouldn't bleed them out. They eat them with the blood. They weren't into that stuff. They were like, if you guys just follow these few simple things, and I know that doesn't all resonate in our world because it's not even an issue or a problem. My point here is they just kept it simple. They didn't get into tons and tons of other things. It's just keep it simple. And then they said, look, the law of Moses has been preached in every city from the earliest times and is read in the synagogues on every Sabbath. Now, they weren't like giving rules as opposed to the Bible. They're like, he's like, look, you already have the Bible. Like the law, even to the Gentile world coming to Christ, it's not like they don't know this stuff. I mean, they know right from wrong. I mean, they've been taught, they've heard about it. That's been all over the place. So you got that. So I look at it in my home, okay, well, you want to have some simple rules, and you always have the Bible. We're not talking about replacing the Bible. That's always in play, right? 10 Commandments, doing the right thing, being honest. Those things never, ever leave us. But then as far as how we operate our house, what are my rules going to be? My dad would always say, look, hey, guys, I want to know where you are. I want you home by curfew. Wasn't that complicated? Don't go anywhere. I don't want you guys going anywhere. I don't know where you're at. And this is before cell phones or anything like that. Like, I want to know where you're at. And so let's say we got a little bit older, so weekend, he goes, you're not going to be home out after midnight. Because, quote, my dad, nothing good happens after midnight. He said it over and over and over again. I've read the papers since those days of leaving home, and I've seen a lot of the chaos and problems have happened after midnight. So I listened to my dad. I thought about what he said. He goes, okay, that's what I want you to do. He expected you to listen to him and not backtalk. That's what he expected. I tried backtalking my dad twice. He made it memorable, and I didn't do it again. So it was pretty much that simple. You all went to church. He didn't harp about what clothes you wore or what your T-shirt was. If you're at the beach, let's say, at the ocean, you'd always buy a T-shirt when we were kids. That stuff he never talked about. It wasn't outrageous. It wasn't something far out there. He had nothing to say. We hung posters in our bed. He didn't have too much to say about all that kind of stuff. He had some simple things that he would talk about, and that's the way I believe we should be. As I raised my children, it's pretty simple. Listen to your parents. Church is important, right? Service is important. And I had this thing for me. I'm telling you what, I would do it for a short time on a Saturday morning. Saturday mornings, a lot of times, you're getting chores done and whatnot. I'm outside. I'll go outside. 30 minutes, 40 minutes later, where are those guys, right? Because my mentality is I'm not out here to work by myself. You know what I mean? If I wanted to work by myself, I wouldn't have had kids, right? You know what I'm saying? I've got kids. I want your help. I want you out here with me. And so I would always have this principle, we move as one. We play together, right? Then we play together. We work together. Everything today we do, we move together as a team. So even in our house, we only ever had one television. We weren't going to have a house where my one daughter and my other daughter in their bedroom had a TV, and then my son had a TV, and we'll all be separated. They're going to be up in their bedroom doing their thing. And I'm like, no. We're not going to do that. We're going to be together. Whatever it is we're doing, we want to have that camaraderie. So to me, that was a thing. So it was pretty simple. Just listen. We move as one. And I stayed off a lot of the picayune things. I wasn't bugging them about, don't wear a hoodie. Don't put your hood up when you go out of the house. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, that stuff, Forget that. That's not my battle. It's not where it's going to be won or lost. I'm interested in what the Bible says. I'm interested you hear what I have to say, and you listen to me, and they did. But I remember being at a football game, and there was a parent there, and the parent was more on the strict side. Sometimes not on the important things, I didn't think, but so his daughter comes walking by at the football game. She doesn't have her jacket zipped, and he just barks at her, and it was just so harsh to me. Hearing it as an outsider and seeing the response of the daughter, zip up your coat. That's people around, you know what I'm saying? It's there's other adults standing around. It's kind of embarrassing. I'm looking around. No one had their coat zipped. I did. Should I feel guilty? Oh my goodness, I don't have. Man, I'm sorry. Excuse me, sir. You know what I mean? I didn't zip up my coat. I'm no one was zipping up their coat in that day. Who cares? You know what I'm saying? You got a kid. They don't want to zip up your coat. They want to be cold. I'm not going to argue with you about these kind of things, because what I saw is drive, and you're driving them right to rebellion. And when that kid did rebel, it was colossal. And I'm yeah, because you set up all these things, talked about all the stuff that you didn't need to talk about. I remember one mother, and we were at a church picnic when I was a youth pastor back in the Philadelphia area, and there's a big school, right next to the church, huge field. So everyone's at the church picnic, and she comes out, and she's there with her boys, and she says to her oldest son, she says to him, the teenager anyway that I work with, and she said to him, don't go across that field. And I'm thinking to myself, why is that a rule? You know what I'm saying? Don't go across that field. There's nothing across the field but a school. And on the other side of the school is probably another field. There's nothing there. He wouldn't have even thought about it if you didn't say it. I'm even thinking to myself, let's go across the field. You know what I mean? You're just setting it up, making up this rule. She would buy cereal and then tell her boys, don't eat that. You're not allowed to eat that cereal. I'm thinking to myself, why would you buy it? You bought cereal and then tell your kids, make a rule they don't eat it. And you can see why kids are they're bucking. They're having a problem with it because you're putting all these restraints on them that they don't really need. Just keep it simple. So I look at it and just say, Pastor Griffith used to come to our church. Most of you wouldn't know him, it was so many years ago, but he was a pastor where my wife grew up. And he would say, listen, guys, as parents, if you're basically just all rules and no love, you're authoritarian. If you're all love and no rules, you're permissive. He said, you got to be in the middle somewhere, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you can have some rules. You got to have some love as well. And I remember when he said that really meant a lot to me. I'm yeah, I can't just be that authoritarian, hammering stuff home. Keep it simple. And I've got to teach concretely in Deuteronomy 6, 7 through 8, impress them, these laws, right? Impress them on your children. Impress it. Make sure they know it and understand it, right? Talk about them. Man, God's rules, God's ways, God's stories, right? Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road and when you lie down and when you get up. What are the rules you're going to teach? If you're a grandparent and you have grandkids around, what are their rules going to be? I'm not going to let Zeke get away with whatever he wants to, I can tell you that. When he's old enough to listen, he's going to be minding what Grandpa says. And I know Jerry will feel the same way. He'll be minding what Grandma says. And I'm sure his mom, knowing Cassie as well as I do, he's going to be listening to her as well, and Tony. So I'm going to expect that. I'm going to teach you stuff. My dad taught us morality and hard work and service. He taught us those things. And some of it, by the way, and I'm going to say it a little bit later too, he didn't teach us all just by what he said. Some of it was by his example, is what he told us. And then he would tell us stories of maybe when there was temptation, how he handled the temptation. He would sit us down, and we would talk about these things. And so my dad was there teaching, and I remember the lessons. He would say to me all the time, son, don't cross that bridge till you get to it. Don't cross that bridge till you get to it. Because I was always thinking ahead. What about this? What about this? What about this? He goes, you're not at that bridge. Why are you trying to cross it? You're not even there. Cross that, stop. Son, you're going to what if yourself to death. Cross that bridge when you get to it. And my mom would say, Bill, you can't fight every battle. You can't argue about everything. Draw your swords wisely, son. Draw your swords wisely, son. Draw your swords wisely, son. What did I learn? Don't cross that bridge until you get to it. Draw your swords wisely. Just wisdom that my parents gave me that I've never forgotten about. So I love it when I hear of our families and they're doing stuff they're teaching their kids. And I love it when I hear about devotionals and parents buying devotionals for their son or their children, sitting down, reading it, doing it together, hearing about family prayer circles, hearing about other things families are doing at night. Hey, we're sitting down, we're covering the Bible. Awesome. I commend our families, by the way, who are spending the time giving instruction and doing simple things like teaching these Bible stories. Some of the things that were super influential on me when I was younger was just knowing the story of Joseph when he ran from temptation, Potiphar's wife, like it was huge. 12 years old, hey, what are you going to do, Bill? And we're sitting around playing mini football. And so we were between plays at practice, and the kid's like, what are you going to do if this happens to you? And I'm thinking about Joseph. I'm like, well, I'm going to run. The kid's like, oh, really? You're going to run? I'm like, yeah. Because I'm thinking that's what Joseph did. Now, that kid, I don't know how he grew up or what he knew, but I'm thinking in the Bible, this is already instructive when I'm 12 years old. I already know what I'm going to do because somebody along the way put these important lessons in my mind. So Jehonadab, he saw the judgment of Ahab's family, saw the direct danger of Baal worship, and so his rules were to protect his family in future generations. And there are rules that I have in our world that we have as parents that should be for what? Is to protect the kids. And sometimes our children need protection from themselves because they don't have the wisdom to know all things. So a child may stay up all night and play video games. They might. Why? Because they're fun. That's why. And they want to stay up and they don't really want to go to bed. And so what do you as a parent do? You're like, hey, you're not going to stay up all night. And you're not going to be watching video games. Why? Because I got to protect your health. Because you got to go for school. You're going to do this. You're not going to do this, right? Some of the stuff I'm going to talk to you about is for your protection. For me as a parent, you all do what you want. So I'm just talking about what we did. I was a youth worker for so many years. I mean, I spent years of part-time going through seminary. I did 11 years worth of youth work here. I was a youth sponsor before that. I probably have like 17 years of working with teenagers. So when I had my children, I knew there was one thing. When my kids come to me and ask me if they can have sleepovers and go over to their friend's house, I'm going to have a question. Is there a teenage boy there? If the answer to that question is yes, no, you're not going. That's simple. Why? Because I don't know what's going on over there, but I've been working around teenage boys long enough to know, you know what I'm saying, that was not a group I learned to trust, right? So I'm like, no, if there's a teenage boy there, you are not going there. Why? Is it mean? Is it horrible? No, because I love you and I want to protect you. I remember my wife one time, she was going to somebody, kids wanted to go over some bonfire. My wife stopped over to the woman's house and said, hey, I just wanted to meet you. My daughter says she wants to come here. I want to find out what's going on. And she goes, I'm glad you did, because almost no one ever asks. No one ever checks and makes sure this is actually what's going on. She goes, I just want to make sure this is actually what's going on. So protect your children. And one area of protection I would like to suggest is this: cell phone use. They say like half the kids in our country, 11 years old, I guess and older it is, half of them have smartphones. At 11. I'm like, what? Half? Shouldn't there? Listen, this thing here, you put that in my hands when I'm 12, I'm going to promise you something, parents. I did not have the maturity to handle that. I did not have the maturity to handle that information. In fact, if it wasn't coming to me bad stuff, I would have found it myself, all right? I would have gone there and I would have found plenty of bad stuff, and I've shown it to my brothers and shown it to my friends and everything else. I'm glad I didn't have it. Now I see you're walking around. One time I was out with some of my friends, and there's a 5-year-old there at the dinner table with the rest of us. We're all out at a restaurant. This kid, I just met him that day. You can't talk to him. You try to pull this thing away from him, it's like you're chopping off fingers. He is pitching fits about it. You know what I'm saying? Because he wouldn't put it down. He wouldn't stop looking at it. His whole world, man, he's 5 years old. Now, I talk a lot of times about trajectory. What is the pattern in your life? What is the trajectory of it? In your relationship with your spouse, in your relationship with God, what is your trajectory? Here's my question. What is the trajectory of this? Isolation? Darkness? Depression? Anxiety? What? There's mental health issues associated with this. Now, I know we're not going to be pitching cell phones, but I say this. What age my child is when they get one, I would say as long as possible, I'd hold off on this. I would not be putting this just indiscriminately in a kid's hand. I would have rules like you're not going to bring that to the dinner table. You're not going to take this to bed with you. Like, you're not going to do it. And that's going to stay down in the kitchen. That's going to stay in the dining room, wherever. It's going to stay on a charger, not going up there with you. And if your kids can't handle it and you find out they've been on that phone all night long, because you can check and find out what the phone activity is, we actually went as far as parents with one of our children. We shut the phone off at a certain time of night and didn't open it and didn't allow it to come back on until a certain time in the morning. And you know what I say? I'm paying that bill tough. You know what I mean? Too bad. I don't care if you like it or not. There's got to be some type of rule or standard about this. This whole thing, giving a kid a phone and thinking everything's going to be hunky-dory and all is going well, I promise you it is not. There's no way. Just as an adult, what I've seen there, I'm not even looking for this junk. You know what I'm saying? And I'm traveling in hiking groups and kayaking groups. I mean, that's where my circles are. So that's, usually a pretty clean group, to be honest. This is a disaster. That's what I'm saying. A kid all the time on this. We used to actually play board games. You know, I spent my life, I grew up like this. Here's the rule. Get out of the house all summer long. You guys aren't going to sit around and watch TV. You're not going to just get out of the house. So we were out of the house. When do we come back? When we're hungry. That's when you come back. You play. We play kickball. We play baseball. We play football. We hunted for snakes. We built forts. We shot our BB guns. We rode our bikes. All growing up, this is what you do all day long. You're using your imagination. You're out there in the beautiful sunshine. You're hanging out with your friends. You're having adventures. The things that you're going to remember for life. The colossal bike wrecks, the different stories you have. You know what I'm saying? Like the stunts you got into that you're laughing about for the next 50 years. What's memorable about this? You know what I'm saying? Like, man, you ought to see my memories, kids. Let me tell you something. Grandpa's going to share what my life was like. Man, I sat in that living room. I demolished people on my phone in that game. I was the master of this. I don't know. To me, that does not seem that memorable. I think it's leading to isolation, poor communication, can't connect, can't relate to people. So my thinking is, why can't we as parents say, no, you're not going to use it that much. There's going to be limits. Isn't that what being a parent is? You don't let your kid dictate that because they've got no clue as to what's coming down that road. They have no clue what their trajectory is or what the outcome of these things are going to be. And by the way, our society still doesn't know what the outcome of this is going to be because it's all still so new. But I promise you this, it's not going to be good. That much I will promise you. I don't see any great benefit in coming from that. So I'm going to suggest this. We need to make sure that we are setting rules that protect our children, teaching them God's laws. And we're also going to teach our kids relationally because he said, when you sit down, when you get up, on the way. So what does that mean? Deuteronomy 6, again. When teach them, right? I want you to impress these things upon your children when you sit down, when you get up, and on the way. Now, if I'm impressing something on my children when I'm sitting down, and when I'm standing up, and when I'm on my way, that means one thing. They're with me, right? I can't be talking to somebody who's not actually with me. And so in my life, what I found was this. I had to make time for my children. Yes, I was busy as a pastor. Yes, there were a lot of nights out. But I made sure Monday night, sacred. Friday night, sacred. I made sure that on the weekend, Saturday, as much as we could, unless there was a wedding or something going on, we were going to take our kids, we were going to go somewhere. We're going to get away from that phone, even have cell phones like this at that point. We're going to get away from that phone at the home, and we're going to go do something, and we're going to spend time together. I've never regretted that, ever. Are we spending the time with our families that we need to be spending time with our families? Because so often what I have seen is this. The bond that you build with your children is strong. Way stronger than anything that you could ever realize. Now, you may be in the throes of it right now with your children, and they're younger. Maybe they're teenagers. And the one thing that they act with you is they would love to not see you again. They would love to not hear from you again. And I realize you think that they can't stand you, you're never going to get along, and you'd like to part ways and see each other in heaven someday maybe. You know what I'm saying? And that's all good. You have no clue what your influence is right now. I don't care how they act. I don't care what they say. What I've seen is this. No matter how much that kid wanted to pull away from good rules, like God's rules, and go the other way, when they saw mom and dad say, heck no, like that's not going to fly, we're not going to put up with it, they had to make a decision. Get along with mom and dad? That. You know what? Mom and dad are more important. Even when they went to buck, it still was such a strong anchor, such a strong tether in that relationship, especially when you're reiterating the truth. Instead of just saying, oh, is that the way you want to go? Okay, honey, I love you no matter what. When you're saying, hey, that's not right, I'm not going to put up with it, that kind of parenting, right? We're talking about good, solid parenting. That's a tough bond to break away from. And all these things, and what I've seen over and over again, parents, you're going to win in the end. Fact, I knew when my daughter went to college. My daughter went to college, I was calling her, making sure she's okay. Dad, I don't want to hear from you. I'm like, okay, you call me every 3 weeks. I didn't like it, you know what I'm saying, because I missed her. But You know what? I knew one important truth. I'm going to win in the end. I know I will. And guess what? My daughter lives here in Ashtabula County. I get to see my grandson all the time. Why? That kid, I hate this county. I'm never going to live here. Bah, 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 bah. You know what I'm saying? Woo! She's right here. You know what I mean? And I knew it back then. You know, I'm like, I'm going to win in the end. You know what I'm saying? I just know it. Why? Because we have a good relationship. And no matter how much they act and great, that relationship is hugely important. Rechabites established a family identity. This is our lifestyle. This is who we are. You're allowed to establish a family identity. And then you're going to hear this. And invariably, you're going to say, you can't do that. You tell your kids you can't do that. And they're going to say, all my friends do it. Which means some of their friends do it, okay? Not all of them. All my friends do it. Their family does it. And you know what you tell them? What do you tell them? That's not our family, right? Not our family. Listen, you've been waiting for your chance your whole life to say this. You know what I'm saying? You're going to get your chance as parents, especially with young kids, to say that same thing, but that's not our family. That's not who we are. There used to be a man, he came to church when I was young. He'd been a successful businessman, a World War II pilot, super interesting, super great family. And he told me this. He said, Bill, this is what I did as my family. I built a hub. He said, I believe every family needs a hub that the family's built around. I'm like, okay, what's that? He goes, we water ski. Now, I was never going to do that. I didn't know a thing about it. Still don't know a thing about it. It wasn't my thing. But I heard what he said. There needs to be a hub. Well, I liked yard sailing and picking and flea markets and all that stuff. I drag my kids into all these things. We get up first thing in the morning. We go out yard sailing on a Saturday. We all go get lunch. I make sure they got ice cream. And that they had a fun time with it. That was a hub for years. Man, they'd get to set up at flea markets and sell their stuff and be out there with me, and we did it together. Camaraderie. You know what I'm saying? It was at least togetherness. Then we had church, and that was another big hub. No one even questioned this. I mean, you're going to come to church. My kids was come hear me one, go serve one. Come hear me one, go serve one. I mean, this is the way that we grew up. That was a huge hub. Then there were a lot of incidental things along the way. Like sometimes we'd be into, hey, after church, let's go up and get coffee in the harbor, as they were in college and late high school. And there'd be other times we'd say, oh, let's go to Andover and get ice cream over at Yorkie's. You know, we'll go hang out over there. Last summer, one Sunday afternoon, we took the Frisbees, and there's a big earthen dam there, and we were flying them. Like I was way up on the top. They're like ants down there. I was flying the Frisbees, and they were trying to catch them down there. Here, my kids are all adults. You know, my daughter, I don't even remember how old she is, 30 more, something like that. You know, at this point, my oldest, we still do stuff together. We've always been doing stuff together. It was always the way of it. Like Friday night's such a big family. And I remember even when they were teenagers, before they did anything else, they'd be, well, Mom, Dad, what are we doing? Why? Because they were so used to us spending time together. Hub. In that relationship is where you get those opportunities to really, really talk about the things that count. So when you're there and your children start to talk to you, now sometimes they're going to say things you don't like. I'm telling you, the biggest temptation in the world, shoot it straight out of the air, blow it up. Now, the problem is you didn't really listen, you know, and what you taught them is they can't come and talk to you. A lot of times you got to realize your kids say a lot of things. They don't mean everything they say. A lot of people don't mean everything they say anyway, even adults. They say something big, you shoot it down. My counsel is always this. No. Just listen. Let them talk. Let them talk it out. I want to hear what they have to say. Because I know this. For me to coach them, to guide them, I've got to have open lines of communication. And that means I can't like some parents have problems. Like they get into real struggles with their teenagers. And let's say, for sake of argument, smoking, you don't want them smoking. So every time you want to see them, you want to hit it. Or they're too much on their computer, or they're not doing this or that, whatever it is. Every time you see them, you're going to say, I don't want you doing that. I don't want you doing that. I don't want you doing that. This is the only conversation you have. And what are you reinforcing? I'm never going to measure up. I can't please my parents. They're never going to be happy. Because this is all I talk about. The only time you even talk to your kids is when they're in trouble. And when you're mad at them. I'd like to suggest that's probably not a great idea. I think it's good. Like I've seen significant problems in my own family's life, and I'm telling you, significant. I did not talk about it every time I saw them. I talked about other things. I told them what I thought. They knew what I thought. Not rocket science. You know what I'm saying? Every one of the brothers knew what I thought. You know, so they knew. I just shut up about it because I knew. I'm like, you still got to have open lines of communication. You still got open lines of communication. And then you know what I would find? God would give you that opportunity to carpet bomb it. Do you know what I'm saying? Okay? I remember one time, one of my children, they came to see me. They were in my office. You're on my turf now. You know what? You're going to hear exactly what I think. Because I'm going to tell you, you bring it up, boom, boom. I'm just dropping the truth on them. You know what I'm saying? Here's what it is. And you know what? I think it was very helpful and instrumental. I didn't harp on it all the time. I didn't talk about it all the time. But when I got my chances, I did. Because I've told parents before, listen, take your kid out to lunch and talk to them about other things. You don't have to talk to them about whatever the problem is all the time. Because then they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk to you now. You know what I mean? It's just constant negativity. No, just talk to them about normal stuff. And guess what? That builds the basis in this relationship you have to address the other things. You're going to be much more successful. Do you understand? These guys, Rechabites, these people talked about this stuff. They were family. They were together. And because of that, that was huge. And so we've got to have is, you know, as we teach, is by example. I can't say do as I do, do as I say, not as I do. Parents, dads, you want your kids. You can't stand it when your kids talk nasty to your wife, right, to their mother. Don't talk like that to your mother. Well, where did they learn that from? All right, because if they learned it from you, there's no sense in you saying it. If you want to talk nicer to their mother, you talk nicer. And then they'll talk nicer, right? I'm setting an example. I want you guys going to church. Do you go to church? Whatever you want them to do, you want them to work hard, you work hard. They're going to follow your example. And trust me, that example you set is profoundly huge. So parents, you teach them, and then you expect it. I expect you to do the right thing. And so when I was a parent, I wanted to instill it, I wanted to expect it, and I wanted to enforce it. Because when you instill it well enough into a kid, it's not going to matter if you're there or not. A lot of the bad junk that happened in my life where there was true temptation, my mom and dad weren't miles around, all right? But their teaching was with me. And so I knew to say no. And I knew to say no. But yeah, you get away with it. No one's going to know. I was like, well, God's going to know for one thing, and that's just not who I am, right? Because we're the Rechabites. In our case, we're the McMinns. Not how we live. It's not what I'm going to do. It's not my direction. I want nothing to do with it. That's a win. When your kid's going to follow what you said, and you're not even around because you've instilled it. And fortunately, my folks instilled into me to fear God and to think not only just about them, but what is God going to think? And then I expect it. I'm not one to argue. I was always one of those guys. Speak softly, carry a big stick, Teddy Roosevelt. I'm not here to argue with you guys. Take out the trash. I'll be like, I expect you to take it out. Do it now. Do it an hour from now. Just want it done. Not here to talk about it. Not a conversation. Just do it. I didn't have those arguments because I didn't allow it. They're going to argue with you all day. If you allow it, you open up that door, you want to start the argument route, oh my goodness, they'll be experts at it. You know what I'm saying? All the reasons why I'm not even fair, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, bag that. I just told you to do it. You know what I'm saying? I expect you to do it. Same with church and all that. I expected it. We never had a question. This was never a Sunday morning conversation growing up in our house. Hey, we going to church today? I mean, I didn't ask it to my dad. My kids never asked it to me. Of course we are. What are you talking about? We're going to church today. Yeah, I mean, we don't reinvent the wheel every week, right? No, it's expectation. That's just how we roll. This is what I expect. We're going to do this together. We're going to work together, play together. All these things. You expect it, and they're going to tend way more to come that way. You're also going to enforce it. I was never one to make idle threats, not ever. I'm not the kind of, I was never, even as a youth pastor, I wouldn't do it. If I tell you something's going to happen, it's going to happen. If I tell you, you do that, I'm taking you home right now, guess what? You're going home. I'd have that with the kids at times, because one was caught smoking in the boiler room at the old church back in the Philadelphia area. I said, I catch you doing that, you're going home. Oh, don't take me home, don't take me. What'd I tell you? I tell you do it, I'm taking you home, taking you home. I'm not here to make idle threats. I was never one to say, if you kids do that one more time, there's no Christmas. How about that? Everyone in the brother knows that's not real. You know what I'm saying? They're not serious. I would enforce things with my children, and especially as they got older, and I'd get some lip. I'd say, you know what? That kind of attitude you're going to give me, I'm going to take that cell phone, that little precious thing of yours, or iPad, or whatever it was, take it away. I'm going to take it away for 3 weeks. Go to the calendar, circle the date, say nothing. Say nothing. I locked it up in the gun safe with my youngest daughter. Locked it up, say nothing. You even asked me about this for the next 3 weeks, and it's going to be longer. I don't hear one word from it. Why? Because they needed to learn. Dad doesn't make idle threats. When Dad says he's going to do something, he means he's going to do it. Like no goofing around. And 3 weeks go by. And you know what? As time and who knows how many years have gone by since those days. It seemed like forever, right? The attitude was way better at the end of 3 weeks, I can tell you that. Why? You're serious about it. I'm not arguing with you. I'm telling you what I want. I'm telling you what I expect, and I'm going to enforce it and make sure that you're doing it. So parents, parent with hope. You come into it. I know there's going to be tough days. Children get to be adults, and it can get even harder. And that's a fact. You're never not a parent. I'm still a parent. I'm going to be a parent till my dying day. I know it. I get it. They're still going to come. There's still going to be questions. Jerry, the same. Both of us. We're both parents. We love being parents, but I can tell you, parent with hope. Because you've got these verses that are great. Train them up, start them off. When they're old, they're going to be there. All right? You got to believe in the process, as they say, right? I'm going to teach my kids the right thing, and I do this repetitively, and I'm consistent. I'm going to teach them. I'm going to expect it. It's going to work out well. Let's stand up as we close this time in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, a lot of different anecdotes and stories and reminders and memories, and for all of us, we're just different spots. I'm in a different place than some of these young families are, but I remember those days. And we've got to raise our children well. We've got to do the right thing. We've got to protect our kids. God, help us to be good parents and get our hand on that helm and direct the ship where the ship needs to go. And then they'll be headed in the right direction. Give us the wisdom, give us the strength. We ask it in Jesus' name, amen.